Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Saints Insider Podcast. I'm Zach Ewing, and with me are the true Saints Insiders, Rod Walker to my right on your screen, Luke Johnson below, and Jeff Duncan over in the corner. It's training camp season. It's time to be optimistic and speculate and figure out how the Saints are going to go 17-0 and win the Super Bowl this year. Or maybe come just short of that. So what we're going to do is go over the first couple days of training camp, some of our basic expectations for the next 20 or 30 minutes or so. And we're going to try to do this at least once a week during training camp so that we can keep you all updated. And of course, we've got the rest of our coverage at NOLA.com/Saints. And we're set and ready to go, guys. I know it's been hot out there. I can tell you that. And by the way, if you do have questions, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, leave your questions, and we might get 5-10 minutes at the end to answer some questions. But for now, we're going to go through some stuff. First off, guys, Luke, we'll start with you. Early impressions of Saints camp and just what you see from this team. It's so early; they're not even in pads yet. But anything you've noticed?
Yeah, I just think that they are exactly what they should be at this point, which is a veteran team that looks like it has a lot of people who can help out. This is a team that we all kind of anticipate should be at the very least in the mix for an NFC South title, which would be putting them back in the playoffs. It'd be the first division title in a couple of years, first time back in the playoffs since the 2021 season or 2020 season. So I think they've got all the pieces there, and I think that's pretty evident when you're watching a practice. Been impressed with Derek Carr. I've been impressed with their pass catchers. I feel like every year I've covered training camp, they've got like 10 rookies out there, and they're kind of hoping one of them will turn into a Rashid Shaheed or something like that. But they've got some guys with legitimate NFL experience who are beyond their main guys. Like they're going to have people on this team who can go out and catch passes. It's been a problem for them in years past. So I think the first look is pretty good. The only question is you just wonder how they hold up. That's been their case for a couple of years now, and they've got an aging team. I think they were the oldest team in the NFL last year by snap count, average, and they're only getting older. So we'll see how they hold up. But I think if they do, I think they've got a chance to be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, every team in the NFL, or just about every team in the NFL, is optimistic on July 27th, Rod. But I think it's a little bit different here because you can see the talent on the roster and say, well, there should be expectations. And I think this year there's going to be some consequences if those expectations aren't met for really the third year in a row.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think you look at Dennis Allen going into year two. I mean, he pretty much has everything that a coach could possibly want. I mean, he went out and got the quarterback that he wanted in Derek Carr. You look at you got Michael Thomas, who looks healthy, which he didn't have last year for most of the season. He has a schedule that I think is very favorable. I mean, you look at that schedule, and I think I was on the radio show the other day, and I think I was saying how I think Trevor Lawrence is probably the best quarterback that they even faced this season. So I just think there are a lot of things that are lined up for this team to be successful. I don't think that automatically means they will be, but I think that the ingredients are there, which I think is that's part of the process. I think it's set up good for the team.
Yeah, and part of that is, as you mentioned, the health. I mean, they've just got to stay healthy. Jeff, you've been doing this a long time. Anything strike you as different about this year's group besides what these guys have said just in the first 2 days?
No, I think Luke and Rod hit the nail on the head. I do think, it's hard to really evaluate anything right now. They're not in pads. They're not even in shells yet. I think what this period of time does is allows you to see the health, maybe the shape and conditioning of the players, get acquainted with maybe their size, and what these guys look like in pads when they get there. But until they really start putting the pads on and getting engaged in contact, it's almost impossible to evaluate. I mean, today during the team sessions, there looked like there could have been multiple sacks of the quarterback, but they're not obviously hitting the quarterback or even doing anything in that regard. So hard to evaluate performance, but I would say Luke made a really good point. I mean, this is an older team. They come into a year when most of the rest of the division is in transition. The Bucks The Panthers and Falcons are all kind of transitioning to new quarterbacks, moving on, and the Saints have easily the most experienced, proven commodity at quarterback in a league that's built around quarterback play. So I think they should be the favorites in the division, but that comes with a little bit of a downside in that we've seen in the past how many of these players have been injured, and the Saints have had these injuries, and I think it's certainly a concern as to how they'll hold up. Right now, Jimmy Graham looks terrific, but he's 36 going on 37. He's had injury history throughout his career. How's he going to hold up once they start playing games? I think that's something we all have to kind of caution and temper our enthusiasm on, because inevitably some of these guys aren't going to make it through.
And the first one of those, I guess, to have any sort of injury, Trevor Penning today misses practice with a foot injury. Dennis Allen kind of went out of his way, Luke, to say, hey, look, it's minor. It's not related to the surgery. It's no big deal. It's a precaution. But you have to – I mean, the guy missed, 11 games last year with a foot injury. You have to worry about it, right? Luke, you might be muted there.
I am. Sorry, I've got a.
It's the first one. It's the first one.
Look, I've got a newborn baby at home, so we gotta be judicious with this mute button. But look, I am concerned about Trevor Penning, and it's the same concern I have with a lot of these guys the Saints draft, where they have this idea where they want big, long, unnaturally long athletes. Guys who are supreme athletes at sizes where you don't really see like that. They target that, and I think sometimes it's hard for those guys to stay healthy. Honestly, like Trevor Penning, if you stand next to him, I mean, the guy is built like a refrigerator. He's like 6'7", 330. He's huge, and it's hard in an NFL locker room to stand out as somebody who's huge. And Penning is a mountain of a person. Right? I think sometimes when you have players like that, it's really, really hard for them to stay healthy. I think it's the same sort of deal. Teron Armstead, was a guy who he's playing at 300 pounds. If you take Teron Armstead off a football field today and be like, you're retired, and you see him 3 months from now, he's going to lose like 70 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. It's just, it's hard to be that big, that athletic, and not sometimes have these injury issues. I'm not saying it's like a 1-to-1, everybody's going to have these problems thing, but it's something I think you got to be concerned about with Penning, especially after last year when he went through 2 significant injuries. He played 6 games, he had 2 significant injuries. It's a concern, and it might not be a concern right now, but it's something that we got to watch and pay close attention to this year.
I mean, he's practiced one day and now he's having to sit out like that. You can call it minor. You can't construe that as a good thing.
Right. And for what it's worth, I do want to add before you go on, Jeff, I don't think this is like a toughness issue. Right. And I want to make sure that we clarify that. I think Trevor Penning is tough as nails, but it's some guys, I mean, it's just, you deal with this stuff, and it's going to be something he has to manage through his career.
And I think we've seen just in the last few days, the Saints' moves, I think, are certainly with that thought in mind. What happens if we have similar injuries to our offensive line like we had a year ago? I think they really wanted to upgrade the depth along the offensive line with experience. I think Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen, probably Doug Marrone, started looking at that depth chart saying the guys behind our front line really don't have a lot of experience. We've got to upgrade there. And I think we're seeing it already in practice, how they're moving some of the ones, some of the starters around, playing them in different positions. I think this is all with that in mind, what Luke's talking about, concerns over injuries at that position, because they've got some older players there that have shown injury history in the last few years. And that's why I think they brought in these guys that got skins on the wall, started games at the NFL level at a bunch of different positions.
I mean, as recently as this week, I mean, they talked about, the acquisitions of Craig Turner and Max Garcia. Max Garcia is the guy they brought in specifically to add depth at the center position in case something happens to Eric McCoy. So, yeah, what Jeff is saying is spot on. I mean, they know the urgency of getting this offensive line healthy, and when it doesn't get healthy, they know they have to have these guys ready to step in and play right away.
I think that's probably a good segue into. I wanted to talk a bit about Dennis Allen, and if you look at the roster from top to bottom, I mean, I think it's fair to say this is the most talented team he's ever had as a head coach. Going back to his days in Oakland, his first year in New Orleans. I mean, you have Derek Carr as quarterback in there, and yet the results in his head coaching career have not matched. Now, Jeff, you hit on some offensive line depth, some things they're doing to try to prevent the same number of injuries from happening, which certainly is a viable excuse for last year. But what else do you see Dennis Allen changing, if anything, this year? I mean, do you think it's just a matter of, hey, we've got a better roster, we're going to roll it back and try to win some of those close games and stay healthy? Or do we see his philosophy alter at all?
I don't think he'll alter the philosophy. I think he's still going to be a defensive-minded, physical, win the game in the trenches head coach. He's going to be more conservative than probably fans would like, but that's who he is. And I think you've got to stick to that if you're Dennis Allen. What I've noticed early on, it's certainly, I think, an intentional thing on his part is he's projecting himself more as a head coach. I think there's a lot more confidence in the way he carries himself. And I think there's reason for that. I think he's got his quarterback now, a guy that he knows is proven in this league. It's his handpicked guy he feels really comfortable and confident with. And I think all of that confidence is born out of having some of his stamp on the team. Derek Carr, he's overhauled the defensive coaching staff, gotten in some of his guys on that side of the ball. So I think there's a reason behind all this, but I like what I'm seeing from Dennis Allen. I like the way he's carrying himself in press conferences. It's a small thing, but I think that matters when you're trying to lead grown men and trying to win over, frankly, a fan base that's had a lot of questions after that 7-10 season.
Yeah, and I think that the thing I would add to that is I don't think this is like a philosophical change on Dennis Allen's part, but I certainly hope that with Derek Carr in play and maybe some better health on the offensive side of the ball this year, that they open things up a little bit offensively. They're going to be a team that wants to win in a physical way, right? They're gonna run the ball a lot. They went out and invested in the running back position this offseason. They're investing in their offensive line right now. They drafted Nick Saldiveri in the 4th round. But this is 2023, and you win the ball through your quarterback play, and you win the ball through scoring, or you win games through scoring points. And they've got to do more of that this year. I think they went 5-5 last year in games where the defense allowed 20 points or less. I mean, that can't cut it. And he's got to see that, and he's got to know that. They've got to be better offensively this year, and I hope he sees what he has, and he's like, let's let it rip. Let Pete open it up and go.
I think the addition of Michael Thomas, if he can stay healthy, I think that changes the entire dynamics of this offense. I mean, he just makes his team so much better. Last year, they didn't have that guy that could really go to it. We need a first down here. Let's go to this guy. We know he's going to catch it regardless of who's defending him. I think Michael Thomas, I think he brings that. And I think, to me, out of all the players on that offense, I mean, outside of obviously Derek Carr, I think Michael Thomas is the key to this team being, really successful on offense.
Do you guys agree with that? I mean, how big he's one player, he's a receiver. He may not even be the team's top receiver. Is he that important?
Yeah, I mean, I've written this multiple times this offseason, but having conversations with people on the team throughout the spring and after the season, they all thought they would have been a 10 or 11 win team just with Michael Thomas last year. Like, he was the difference in a lot of those games where they missed these opportunities to get gimme plays, plays that Michael Thomas makes in his sleep, and they just didn't have the guys to get it. So I agree with Rod. I think he's the linchpin for everything they do, and I think if they can add to their offense with what they had with Michael Thomas in the past, where they don't have to feed him 15 targets a game, right? They got a lot more weapons, receiving weapons on this team than they had in those really good offenses in 18 and 19 when they were just force feeding Michael Thomas targets. If they can just get Mike to be a 8 or 9 target guy instead of a 15 target guy and let him go win the 50-50 balls and then rely on Shaheed and Olave to open things up for him. I mean, I think this offense can be really good. Like, it can be really good, but there's a lot of things that have to happen too.
What he does is he brings an element that they just haven't had. That's that contested catch guy, like Rod mentioned, the guy on third down. Luke had a great point in his story the other day about that big third down failure against Tampa Bay where they couldn't close out the Bucs on a 3rd and 1, and Andy Dalton throws a slant and it gets knocked down. That's exactly the kind of play Mike Thomas would have made, and it would have won that game. All they needed probably was that first down. And when you hear Dennis Allen say, look, we got to finish better in games, we got to close people out. There were so many games like that a year ago, and I think a lot of that was on the offense. Even though it seemed like the defense was giving up those late drives to the Bucs, it was really the offense not being able to keep the ball and close out a game. The Bengals game was similar to that. So I think he brings that element. And there's going to be games. Look, if everyone remembers last year, the opening game when he caught 3 touchdowns, I think against the Falcons. But then he had a quiet game, the next week against the Bucs. Really got kind of shut down. There's going to be games like that this year. He's not going to be the offensive player of the year, Mike Thomas, not at this age, not after the injuries. But what he does is he gives them a matchup that they didn't have against certain defenses. But I think Chris Olave, in my opinion, is the guy. If I had to say who's going to be the number 1 receiver, I think it's going to be Olave. But having said that, there's going to be games where Thomas is the number 1 option because of his physicality and the different skill set that he has that Olave doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, I think the offense, obviously, I think we just got a comment from somebody saying, I hope Pete has some new plays. I mean, everything we talk about the offense, the main component of that, the main change is Derek Carr, right? This is the guy they brought in. They wined him and dined him, and we followed that with bated breath. I think as an entire city and Saints fans, hey, is Carr going to come here? Are they going to get their guy? Well, they got it. And Derek Carr has some great things in his past, and he has some more questionable things in his past. I mean, the Las Vegas Raiders let him go, basically told him to go away with 2 games left in the season last year. You don't do that with a superstar. So what is it fair to expect of Derek Carr this year?
For me, I don't think any of us actually know, but I think I'll probably go somewhere in the middle of, there's people that think this can be a little bit.
Having a little bit of trouble with Rod's audio, I think. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying, I'm trying to temper my expectations. There's some people who have the Matt Stafford hope, like what happened with him. Going to the Super Bowl in year 1, and on the other end, people who think he's going to struggle, has almost same struggle. So I'm somewhere in the middle because I think he has more weapons around him here than he's ever had. I think that bodes well for him. I think this is a fresh start for him and a chance to do that. I think the defense can be good. I don't think he has to go out and beat Drew Brees. I think he can just, keep the trains moving a little bit. I think the defense is good enough to probably win some games. So I don't know what he has to be exactly. I'd temper my expectations a little bit and put it somewhere in the middle, I guess.
Yeah, there's a phrase called that scouts and personnel people use when they reference quarterbacks. You're either a truck or a trailer. I think he's going to be a little bit in between. He's not going to carry the team, and he's not going to necessarily be pulled along by the rest of the team like a trailer. I think there's going to be times when he's going to have to do it, like all quarterbacks. And I think he gives them a much better chance at that position of doing it than the guys they've had the last couple of years. But he's not Drew Brees. I mean, there's only one of those guys. And I don't even know if he's in the elite top 10, but I don't necessarily think he has to be for this team to be successful. And if you hear him talk, I mean, he goes out of his way of saying, look, I just have to be me. I have to fit in. I think he's really enjoying that. He's not having to carry the franchise like maybe he felt like he had to do with the Raiders. There's already a bunch of Pro Bowlers here, veteran leaders. He feels like this is a functional organization from top to bottom. So I think he just has to kind of manage the game, like Rod said, maybe be a better version of Matthew Stafford kind of, or maybe Matthew Stafford's a good comparison. A guy that can make a key throw when you need it, but, he's not going to knock your socks off with his stats at the end of the game. And I don't think he needs to for this team to be certainly not the NFC South champions.
Yeah, I mean, I just think about what we've talked about like the last 2 years, right? If they could just get like a above average quarterback play.
Just
right?
competence.
Yeah, just like baseline level, like, hey, be the number 14 quarterback in the NFL, right?
Yep.
Like if they could get that, like they will be a playoff team, they will be a good team, and they will be a team that nobody wants to see in the playoffs. If their defense is still the defense that it has been, right? Just get us there. And I think he can. And look, I don't know if he's going to come in and throw 40 touchdowns like Stafford did with the Rams, but I do think that that is an apt comparison because you've got two quarterbacks who everybody recognized as talented quarterbacks. They were the face of the franchise, they got the big contracts and everything like that. Everybody around the league recognized them. But I think if you look at the two of the five worst run franchises in the NFL in the last 20 years, the Raiders and the Lions are right there. I think maybe you could throw the Commanders and the Browns in there, but I mean, like, it's hard to win and it's hard to be functional. It's really hard to be functional in the Raiders organization where you're playing for different coach year after year. You're playing for under a new OC. The ownership there has been a mess. They've got all these scandals off the field. Go look at the Raiders draft history. Like, it is abysmal. It's really hard to be successful there. And I think you just drop them into a functioning franchise with good players where you don't have these huge expectations and they're just like, hey, just be solid. I think it could be really, really good for Derek Carr.
Yeah, Derek Carr was with the Raiders for 9 years, but it seems like so much longer than that. And I've followed his career because I covered him in high school and college, and I sort of was there from day one. But if you think about the things, I mean, Dennis Allen was his head coach as a rookie for like 4 games and then got fired. Then they moved to Las Vegas a couple years after that, right? He broke his leg late in one season before they left. Then you had the John Gruden fiasco. You had the Henry Ruggs situation. I mean, just so many things that he as a team captain and leader had to deal with. And even though he had nothing to do with them, he had to answer for them. He had to sit in front of the press and say, here's what I think about this and here's what I'm doing about it. I mean, that takes a toll on a player.
Yeah, it had to be really, really hard to be the Raiders franchise quarterback, right? And you look at who they've tried to bring in a number of guys in that situation, and basically all of those guys fell flat on their face, right? The fact that Derek Carr lasted 9 years as a starting quarterback in that organization probably says a lot about him.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up in a few minutes. If you have any questions here for the Saints Insider podcast, drop them in the chat and we'll get to them. But what I want to know, guys, tomorrow's the first practice open to the public, so that's a little different. I think Sunday's the first day off, and then they'll be in pads next week. What are you looking for over the next week or so as we start to count down to that first preseason game?
I think for me, especially on the day with the fans there, we haven't even called. I don't think we even brought his name up yet, but I'm just kind of curious to see how the fans are going to react to Jimmy Graham tomorrow. Just how they haven't seen it in however long it's been, 9-10 years, and he's just a guy that they really like, and I think you'll see a bunch of number 80 jerseys out there tomorrow, and so I'm just kind of really going to be watching him and to see how the team plans to use him. He talked about signing him and his role on the team, so I'm really curious to see what that role is going to be for a guy who didn't even play football last season.
Look, I think when Monday rolls around and we finally get the pads on, you can really start to evaluate line play. Both sides of the trenches, I think, are going to be very important for this team. I personally believe that the front seven of this team is a major question mark. They lost a lot of talent. You just go down the list of Marcus Davenport, David Onyemata, Shai Tuttle, Caden Ellis, and they weren't very good last year up front. Their run defense dropped off considerably. Their pass rush, even though I know they ended up with a nice pass rush, a sack total, almost all their other metrics, quarterback pressures, hurries, knockdowns, they were down near the very bottom of the league in those. Who's going to step up? They've got a lot of qualified candidates, but who is it going to be? I mean, somebody's got to do it. And I think that's an area I really want to focus on. Pass rush, run defense. They don't play a lot of great quarterbacks this year. That's been pretty well publicized, but they do play some good running games, including in the division. Atlanta is a running-based offense. They opened the season with the Tennessee Titans and Derrick Henry. So that's an area they've got to improve on. And I think there's question marks there that maybe we're not really talking about right now because we just see the fact that the Saints over the years have been pretty good on defense, and a lot of those big names are still back. I still think it's a question mark.
I think the Saints have a lot of established stars that we spend a lot of time talking about, and we're going to be looking at all those guys. But look, they've got a lot of young, interesting players that I want to see kind of take the next step this season, or take their first steps. Right? I'm really interested to see what Brian Brzee looks like in pads, and Isaiah Foskey. I think Peyton Turner. I mean, he's in the starting lineup today, and Dennis Allen says he earned that. I want to see him show how much he's earned that in pads. I'm really, really excited to see Kendre Miller after busting some of the rust off after dealing with his injury. See him full go in pads. I think Jeff is right about Chris Olave. We talked to him today. I asked him about his play strength and his strength at the catch point because he brought that up as one of his weaknesses, and he's like, "Yeah, I gained 7 pounds this offseason. I got stronger. I want to see that, right? When they start doing these one-on-ones and see him try to beat some guys to contested catches, because I think if he fixes that part of his game, he could be a superstar, right? Like not just like a wide receiver 2 on a good team, but like a star wide receiver. So they've got all these really interesting young guys. And I want to see how these guys fare against a pretty deep veteran roster.
Yeah. So look, it's early. It's July 27th. A long way to go. Still more than 6 weeks to the regular season opener. Still more than 2 weeks to the preseason opener. So we're just getting started. We're going to improve too. We're going to work on some AV issues and get some graphics in, and we're going to have Saints Insider podcast for you regularly throughout the preseason and the regular season. I'm glad you could be with us today. For Rod Walker, Jeff Duncan, and Luke Johnson, I'm Zach Ewing, and we will talk to you next time on the Saints Insider Podcast. Thanks, everybody.